Hey all, here OS Reviews. So we're taking a quick look at the BEITONG Zeus 2 Elite wireless controller. This is a universal Bluetooth and also wired controller that's compatible with pretty much any system out there, whether it's mobile devices like Android, iOS, connecting it to an iPhone, iPad, or other gaming consoles like the Nintendo Switch, Steam Deck, PC, Xbox, and serves as an alternative to other more deluxe controllers, including the Xbox Elite wireless controller. Also sits at a similar price range. So this is by no means the most budget option out there, but what I think is really cool about this particular model is it has a lot of modularity as part of its design. For instance, all of the buttons as well as the D-pad can actually be swapped out. If you want to change the actuation point of those optical switches, kind of like a mechanical keyboard, you can pull out those keycaps to get a completely different feel for the buttons. In addition to, again, the joysticks as well as the arrow keys, you can even find a version that is quite reminiscent of the aforementioned official Microsoft Xbox controller. Even the shell here is magnetic and you can pull off for other colors and textures. And what's neat is many of the joysticks as well as arrow keys and buttons are included in the box. You'll have a different travel distance for these various keys. You can choose between conductive rubber buttons versus mechanical buttons versus micro switches. Some are going to sound a little bit more clacky, other ones are going to be more quiet. Controller also comes with optional companion app support for mobile devices like Android or iOS, as well as one for Mac and PC, which allows for further customization, mapping the controls to different third-party games, as well as changing some of the functions like the vibration motor so it will buzz to give you that haptic sensation, sensitivity and polling rate. Some of these options you'll be able to more finely adjust. BEITONG also claims minimal delay and fast responsiveness using all of the keys and buttons here, and also different heights that you can play around with for the joystick that you can pick between, as well as having some more advanced keys that you can customize, including something called an AI button on the very top. This is more applicable if you're playing on PC or Mac, so it will pull up kind of a shortcut on your device's screen, allowing you to take screenshots, recording video, as well as clearing up the background RAM, so it's kind of like a quick shortcut utility function. And there's even support for an optional stand, which enables wireless charging for the controller. However, this particular stand isn't included in the default packaging. That part is an extra accessory. Some final quick specs here include also a built-in 3.5mm headphone jack on the controller itself, so if you want to pair with wired headphones, the cable doesn't have to stretch quite as far if you are a little bit further away from the computer or TV. And looks like there's even support for 2.4G wireless nano receiver using USB that you can plug into the computer if you don't want to use Bluetooth or the wired connection method, so 3 ways of pairing. The controller even features 6 customizable buttons on the back, which can be programmed to special commands depending on games that you're playing, so you can assign more specific key combinations to a single click. Apparently it has a higher quality DAC and some EQs built on in, so they are claiming that the sound quality should be a little bit better compared to what you have naturally on a computer. Again, pretty fully stacked as far as features are concerned. On the inside here we have the controller. This is the black/gray variant. Down below here we have all of the various modular components which are included, buttons or switches that you can customize for different tactility as well as actuation points, so it snaps into place using these pogo contacts. And indeed, even right now, they do feel extremely clicky and satisfying. We can also find those additional styles for the 4-way D-pad if you prefer this design, which is, again, quite reminiscent of some of the Xbox Elite series controllers, as you can tell there. Also having this kind of grid-like pattern, but I guess one difference is those are round, versus on here it's more of an angular shape. We also have the 2.4G nano receiver if you don't want to use Bluetooth but still are playing wirelessly. You can plug that into the computer, as well as a USB cable for charging, the 1000 mAh capacity battery, or using it in the wired mode, which can achieve over 10 hours of wireless playback, depends on how much of the vibration motor that you're using as well. And in the wired mode, you can also use a OTG adapter to transform it into Type-C if you want to connect it directly onto something like a Nintendo Switch without using Bluetooth. And here's a final look at some of the kind of buttons on the rear here. We have M1 all the way to M6, left and right shoulder keys. There's also a trigger lock function as well, so you can prevent any accidental key presses if you're not really using those buttons. These are going to be the joysticks. They're coated in a soft touch rubber material having varying depth, so if you want something a little bit taller versus more shorter in terms of travel, you can pick accordingly. And again, the keys themselves, you can also pick between the rubber domed version, which is going to be the most quiet, versus getting progressively more clicky, kind of like a mechanical blue switch. Even the included USB cable, by the way, is braided, feeling pretty good in terms of durability. And now a closer look at the design and build of the Zeus 2 Elite. Again, it does have a pretty cool kind of translucent shell. All the buttons feel precise, as well as, again, satisfying in terms of their responsiveness and sound. And it doesn't really rattle or move around either, despite the modular design. I also like how you can make out some of the screws underneath the translucent shell, giving it more of that steampunk appearance. Now otherwise up top we have the Type-C port, a manual power key, as well as we can start to see some of the M1 to M6 remappable buttons. So it is very fully stacked with different customizable buttons that you can click on depending on the games that you're playing, as well as locking some of these shoulder keys if you don't plan on using them. And on the very back here, we also have access to just a 3.5mm headphone jack and also a switch to turn the haptic vibration motor on or off. Now to change some of the modular components, it's just held into place magnetically, giving it a bit of a pull. And there's also kind of a pogo contact here that can detect if you have a shell popped on or not. We can change out the A, B, X, Y buttons just by pressing down the two clips, and then we can push this out to, again, swap it out for other actuation points, different tactile sensations, just by then popping this in. And really it's a similar story with the joysticks as well as the arrow keys. We can just kind of pull it off, similar to keycaps on a mechanical keyboard, and instead if we want pop this one in, you can see there's going to be two ridges you want to align onto the very top, and afterward just giving it a bit of a press and you're good to go. So this modular design is pretty cool, I have to admit, just because compared to, again, the aforementioned Xbox Elite Series controller, you might be able to customize the look of the controller. When purchasing it, you can select your favorite color and what types of buttons you prefer, but then that is the version that you're essentially stuck with, versus on here you can swap out all of these components yourself if you're not satisfied. Again, very similar to a modular mechanical keyboard in that regard. That said, one trend in mechanical keyboards I've observed recently has been the increase in the magnetic switch popularity. So with magnetic switch keyboards, you're able to change the actuation point of the keys, how far down you have to press before they get triggered, and also that sensation, using software, because there's a magnet underneath that can become stronger or weaker using its electromagnetic force, compared to with a traditional switch that you have to pull out the entire key switch to change the sensation and actuation point, like what we see here. So maybe if there's a next generation version that they are using magnetic switches instead, it could be an interesting alternative that also doesn't require you to physically swap out the pieces, instead controlling it in software. So that is something to consider. Nonetheless, again, I do like this whole super customizable approach. Alright, so in terms of power, if we flick it on, it will start off by default in the 2.4G wireless or the wired mode if you have a cable plugged in. If you want to use the Bluetooth mode, you have to tap on the function key plus the RB button and then flick it on to on, and afterwards you'll start to see the light here flashing very quickly. Again, this part is RGB backlit, and now we are in the Bluetooth pairing mode. And opening up Bluetooth settings on our mobile device, something that's a little bit confusing is that you'll actually see two names, one which is called the BEITONG T9, as well as the second one which is called Xbox Wireless Controller. Both of those names are actually coming from the controller itself. If you click on BEITONG T9, that's where we can open up the companion app and change some of the custom key mapping and then save it on the controller. But if you tap on Xbox Wireless Controller, you'll be able to start playing using the controller's buttons and keys. So just keep that in mind. You may have to pair with both of those names under the Bluetooth settings. After pairing, we can gauge the battery percentage remaining, and the light here will no longer be flashing. We can also take a peek at the BEITONG mobile application. So once paired via Bluetooth, we can also see the battery as well as current firmware version. So the mobile app gives you basically the same controls as the desktop computer app, allowing you to also test the controller to see if all the keys here are functioning or not. We can press down and see those light up accordingly, as you can tell here on the screen, which is good, as well as the accelerometer, the gyroscope, whether that's working or not, and apparently the joysticks here can also be pressed down as a button, as you can tell here as well. and also the keys in the rear we can press on to see if they're functioning. If necessary, you can recalibrate those keys, as well as change the haptic vibration motor to be higher in terms of its vibration intensity or lower. You get some pretty granular control over if you want to flip the orientation of the axes for some reason, or if you want to also compensate for a dead zone. And also here under joystick settings, we can also see the sensitivity curve over here if you want it to be, again, smoother versus more instant, delayed, so on and so forth. The responsiveness you can change, and this particular visualization also tells you how far out you are pressing on the joystick, as you can tell there. So this is all going to be remappable, which is pretty cool. So you get plenty of customization options here using their app. Might be the most I've ever seen on a controller. More vibration options here include all the keys, like the left trigger, right trigger, the grip section as well, all have different haptic vibration motors underneath that you can change independent of one another. And for light adjustment here, you can change the color of the light. So if we tap on red there versus blue, again, it's just changing the logo section there on top. You can have it always on or a breathing flashing mode instead. That being said, it is a relatively small area, I guess. It still looks quite cool, and there are two stripes here at the edge here that's also illuminated, but it's not like the entire surface here is fully backlit. Also, the buttons themselves are not going to be backlit. We even get some mouse settings. So again, if you're using the accelerometer, almost like an air mouse, you can also change properties like left click, right click as well, and also the custom key combinations, assigning macros and special commands, and also that quote-unquote AI custom key to open up additional options. So I wouldn't say this is necessarily truly AI in the sense that we've been seeing it on other products. It's more like a shortcut button more than anything, but it's still nice to find, and you can assign a long press as well as double click to act as a shortcut for functions, again, like screenshot, recording video, so on and so forth. Even more customization here for the trigger sensitivity, as well as under sound settings. This is where you can find some built-in EQ controls for the DAC. So you can make the sound be a little bit more suitable for pop versus dance, classic, jazz, and even create your own sound signature curve by playing around with the frequency sliders yourself. So a lot of attention to detail here, even on areas like, again, audio, similar to an MP3 player, controller going to sleep after X minutes of inactivity, and also restoring the defaults if needed. Pretty good in terms of overall customization. So here on our mobile device, we've got a couple of games that might work well on a controller, and you can flick on or off the custom mapping options. So now the settings are saved, and we're going to connect to the other Xbox wireless controller that we saw earlier under device settings to actually start playing and using the controller. And we can tell how the game here has been mapped to work quite well using the controller, such as the accelerometer, motion sensing is pretty responsive. As we're tilting around, the game's perspective is also changing in front of us, including jumping around the game, as well as using the joystick to further move around. So really not bad. Again, having that accelerometer and haptic vibration motor just adds to the immersiveness of the game overall, as well as the plentiful controls, also making it a little easier to map to specific functions. Of course, much better ergonomics compared to using the default touchscreen of your phone. This kind of conforms to the shape of your hands if you are playing for longer sessions. It's a more comfortable, tactile, and precise experience as you're gaming using a controller like this. So good for mobile platforms, although there isn't really a clip-on accessory, I guess. That might be just the one downside. So if you are primarily using it with mobile, there are certain models out there from companies like GameSir, for instance, that can snap the phone in the middle or clip it onto the top. This one is more designed as a universal controller, so the phone still has to sit somewhere. But again, if you are connecting it to an Xbox, a Nintendo Switch, then I guess it doesn't really matter in those instances since the device is further away and larger anyways. That being said, one thing to keep in mind is not all mobile games will have native support for controllers. It kind of goes without saying that more casual portrait orientation games that are more touch reliant are probably not going to fare quite as well with an arcade style controller like this. Plus, even some more complex games like Pokemon Unite, if the developer hasn't enabled mobile controller support, it may not work immediately from the get-go, just because that's a software limitation imposed by the developer. But on the other hand, titles like Sky that we saw there from earlier, in addition to Asphalt, really even PUBG as well as Minecraft, are examples of titles which may have slightly better native controller support. Just something to keep in mind. But you can also try out cloud gaming options, including the Xbox xCloud service, for instance, if you want to stream back games, and then obviously those titles will all be compatible with a controller, not to mention other PC titles, and again, gaming console titles will of course have pretty much perfect compatibility with a controller like this. The keys never really got stuck, and we're all feeling quite responsive and precise as I was navigating around.
Also, tapping on the profile key will change the RGB lighting color at a click as a shortcut command, as you can tell there. Plus, the haptic vibration motor isn't overly loud, I would say. It's just a subtle sound there, and actually feels quite realistic as you're holding onto it. It doesn't feel too cheap or hollow in terms of its vibrations and rumbles as it's kicking in there. So pretty good in terms of adjustability, not to mention other compatible emulation-style games that you can run on your mobile device, including older titles for Game Boy, PSP, Sega Genesis, GameCube will obviously run very well using a controller like this, since those consoles were originally designed to be played using a controller anyways. So that can be another option, in addition to, again, cloud gaming, along with some native game support. The weight also feels comfortable enough without being too heavy or bulky either. Again, like most premium controllers, such as the aforementioned Xbox Elite Wireless, despite being constructed out of plastic, it never really feels too cheap or creaks as you are bending it or flexing it. It feels actually quite solid, all things considered. So there we have it. That's been the BEITONG Zeus 2 Elite wireless controller, and all in all, again, I do like the hardware of this controller quite a lot. I think it looks pretty good as well as feels very comfortable as you're gaming. Performance has also been solid and responsive enough. Honestly, it's a pretty versatile and fully stacked universal controller with a few additional extras, including a headphone jack and also motion or air mouse support that we don't usually see on many other lower end wireless controllers. So again, if you're looking for a very premium model that has all the features, again, this might be the most advanced and fully stacked wireless controller that I have seen yet. You can learn more details if you are interested in something like this in the links down below. For now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been, again, the BEITONG Zeus 2 Elite wireless controller.